Gia stood in the corner of the huge meeting room, holding her datapad. No one looked at her. No one ever did. She was just the human who brought drinks and took notes. The room was filled with aliens from across the galaxy. Tall blue Durrani with their 4 eyes moved gracefully around the room. Tentacled mock scientists huddled in groups, their skin changing colors as they talked. The warrior Vec, standing over 7 feet tall with tough gray skin, guarded the doors. And then there was Ja, small, pink-skinned, with 2 eyes and 2 arms. Just a human, nothing special. More refreshments, called out Admiral Da, not even turning to look at her. The Durrani Admiral's lower eyes stayed fixed on his screens while his upper eyes scanned the room. "Yes, Admiral," Gia said quietly, hurrying to the food station. As she filled glasses with different colored drinks, blue for the Durrani, green bubbling liquid for the mock, Gia listened carefully to every conversation in the room. The alien spoke freely around her. Why worry about a human? Everyone knew humans were new to space travel. Everyone knew humans couldn't learn the complex languages of advanced species. Everyone knew humans were weak, simple creatures. Everyone was wrong. Gia had a perfect memory. She remembered everything she saw or heard. And after 3 years working at Galactic Alliance headquarters, she understood all 47 Alliance languages. But she always wore her translator earpiece and pretended not to understand. It was easier that way. Being invisible had advantages. She carried the tray of drinks back into the room, moving quietly between groups of important aliens. As she offered refreshments to a cluster of Durrani officers, she heard Admiral Da speaking in low tones. "The reports from the Outer Rim are troubling," he said in the highest form of Durrani language, one that took most Durrani years to master. 3 monitoring stations have gone silent. "Equipment failure?" asked another officer. 3 stations. At the same time. Admiral Da's upper eyes narrowed. Not likely. Gia kept her face blank as she moved to the next group. She had heard rumors about problems on the Outer Rim, but nothing official had been announced. Could it be the humans? Someone suggested. Their colonies are expanding in that sector. Admiral Day made a sound of dismissal. "Humans don't have technology that could disable our stations." "No, this is something else." Gia placed the last drink on a table and returned to her corner. She opened her datapad and pretended to check the meeting schedule while actually making notes about what she had heard. The meeting officially began a few minutes later. Gia recorded everything, as was her job. On the surface, it was a routine security briefing, but underneath, she sensed fear. "We've lost contact with Outpost K9, announced Commander Ta, his tentacles rippling with concern. "That's the 4th this week." The room buzzed with worried voices. "What do our sensors show?" asked a Vec general. "Nothing," replied Commander Ta. "That's what's strange. No signs of attack. No distress signals. They're just gone." As the aliens argued about what to do, Jia noticed Admiral Da slip a data chip to High Commander Bin. They exchanged glances. Something secret was happening. When the meeting ended, the aliens filed out, not one of them looking at Jia or thanking her for the refreshments or the notes she would organize. She was furniture to them, a living machine doing simple tasks. Jia waited until everyone had gone. Then she walked to Admiral Da's empty seat. Under the table, stuck to the bottom where he had hidden it, was another data chip. He probably planned to retrieve it later. She hesitated only a second before taking it. Whatever was happening on the Outer Rim, she needed to know. The humans had colonies there too, even if the Galactic Alliance didn't think they mattered. Being invisible had its advantages. Being underestimated would be their mistake. Jia sat alone in her small room that night. The data chip from Admiral Da glowed softly as she plugged it into her personal device. Her heart beat faster. Taking the chip was risky, but no one would suspect her. She was just a human assistant, after all. The screen filled with star maps and reports. Colony worlds along the outer rim were going dark one by one. No warnings, no distress calls, just silence. Gia studied the maps carefully. She noticed something the aliens had missed, a pattern. The attacks weren't random. They moved in a straight line toward the core Alliance worlds. The next morning, alarms rang throughout the headquarters. Gia rushed to the command center, where chaos greeted her. Aliens shouted over each other in different languages. Screens flashed red warnings. Attention. High Commander Tay's voice boomed over the noise. The tall muck's skin had turned dark purple with stress. We have an emergency. 7 more worlds have gone silent overnight. The room fell quiet. This is now our top priority, Ta continued. All other missions are suspended. Admiral Day stepped forward. We need to send ships to investigate. And leave our core worlds undefended, argued General Han, a stocky Vec female. This could be a trap. Or just a communications problem, suggested Science Director Gill, his 4 Durrani eyes blinking nervously. Perhaps a solar flare damaged the relay stations. 7 worlds at once. General Han growled. Don't be stupid. Gia stood in her usual corner, recording everything on her datavad. No one asked for her opinion. No one even saw her frown as she studied the new data. The pattern was clearer now. Whatever was happening was moving steadily toward them, planet by planet, outpost by outpost. I say it's pirates, said Captain Yun, a young Durrani officer. The outer rim has always been dangerous. Pirates don't have the power to take 7 worlds at once, General Han said. The argument continued for hours. Jia listened carefully, noticing how each species saw the threat differently. The Vec wanted to fight. The Durrani wanted to study. The Mock wanted to run. None of them saw the full picture. That night, when the aliens finally went to their quarters, Gia stayed behind. She used her access code to enter the main computer room. The code worked everywhere. Why restrict a simple human who couldn't possibly understand the complex systems? But Gia understood everything. Her fingers flew over the keyboards as she pulled up all the data from the silent colonies. She noticed small details the others had missed. Strange energy readings just before each colony went dark. Unusual radiation patterns. And something else, a faint signal hidden in the background noise. It was a message, repeating over and over in a language she had never seen before. This isn't pirates, she whispered to herself. This is something new. Gia worked through the night, analyzing the pattern of attacks. She created a map showing where the unknown enemy would strike next. According to her calculations, they would reach the main Alliance space in just 30 days. She saved her findings in a private file. Then she hesitated. Should she tell someone? Would they listen to a human? Admiral Day might listen. He seemed wiser than the others. But what if he asked how she got the information? She would have to admit to stealing his data chip. Gia closed the computer system and returned to her room as the station's lights brightened for the new day. She needed more information before she could act. Outside the window of her small room, stars shone peacefully. But Gia knew better now. Something was coming from the darkness between those stars. Something that swallowed whole worlds without a sound. And only she could see the pattern. 3 days later, it happened. The enemy attacked an Alliance outpost directly. No more silent disappearances. This was war. Commander Taz's flagship raced to the scene with 5 battle cruisers. Jia was brought along to take notes at the officers' meetings. No one questioned her presence. She was as invisible as furniture. When they arrived, the outpost was already destroyed. Broken pieces of metal floated in space. The air had escaped, taking all life with it. Scan for survivors, ordered Commander Tay, his tentacles moving in agitation. None detected, replied the sensor officer. What about the attackers? Gone. Sir, no trace. Gia stood quietly by the wall, watching and listening. This was her first time seeing the aftermath of an attack. The destruction was worse than she had imagined. Later, Commander Ta called a meeting of senior officers. They gathered around a table covered with holographic displays of the damaged outpost. Jia took her place in the corner, datapad ready. "What kind of weapons did this?" asked Admiral Da, pointing to the clean cuts through thick metal walls. "Unknown technology," said Science Director Gill. "The metal was sliced, not burned or exploded." "Could it be energy blades?" suggested Captain Yun. "Too precise," said General Han. "And look at this pattern. It's methodical." The officers argued about the attack for hours. Who was responsible? What did they want? How could they be stopped? While they talked, Jia noticed something on one of the screens. Background radiation readings from the area showed a strange pattern. It reminded her of something she had read in an old human science paper, a theory about quantum entanglement communication. The paper had been written by a human scientist and ignored by the galactic community. Aliens believed quantum communication was impossible. But what if it wasn't? What if the enemy was using technology based on human theories that aliens had dismissed? Jia wanted to speak up, but years of being ignored held her back. They wouldn't listen to a human assistant. They might even punish her for accessing information above her level. Commander Hoon, a younger Durrani officer, was studying the same readings with confusion. "These patterns make no sense," he muttered. Jia made a decision. She wouldn't speak directly, but she could plant an idea. When the meeting ended and everyone left for a meal break, Jia stayed behind to organize the notes. Instead, she quickly typed a message and saved it in Commander Hoon's personal files where he would find it later. The radiation pattern matches theoretical models of quantum entanglement communication. Reference: Earth Science Database. Dr. Kim's paper on quantum theory. She signed it simply Technical Analysis Department, so he wouldn't know it came from her. Has Jia finished her work? Admiral Da returned unexpectedly. She jumped, afraid he had seen what she did. "Still working, human?" he asked, barely looking at her. "Just finishing the notes, sir," she replied, keeping her voice steady. Admiral Da nodded absently and picked up a data device he had forgotten. As he turned to leave, he paused. "What do you think about all this?" he asked suddenly. Jia froze in surprise. In 3 years, no high-ranking officer had ever asked for her opinion. I think they'll be back, sir," she said carefully. "They're testing us." Admiral Da looked at her properly for the first time, his 4 eyes focusing on her face. "Yes," he said slowly. "I think you're right." Then he was gone, leaving Jia standing alone in the room, her heart racing. Had he really seen her? Had he really heard her? Maybe things were changing, or maybe she had imagined it. Either way, she knew the enemy would return. And now she had a name for them. The ship's computer had translated a single word from the strange signal. Sorum. 1 week later, the attacks grew worse. 3 more Alliance stations fell to the Sorum. Fear spread through the galaxy. The Alliance formed a defense council. All the top military leaders met in the main command center. Maps of attacked worlds filled the giant screens. Red dots showed where the Sorum had struck. Jia stood in her usual corner, watching and listening. No one noticed the small smile on her face when Commander Hoon began to speak. "I found something interesting in my notes," he said. "A theory about how the Sorum might communicate." The room grew quiet. "It seems they could be using quantum entanglement," Commander Hoon continued. "That would explain why we can't detect their communications." "Impossible," scoffed Science Director Gill. "Quantum communication across space is just theory. It cannot work in practice." "Actually," said Scientist Bin, speaking up reluctantly, "there is some evidence it might be possible. There was a paper by a human scientist, I believe." Several aliens made dismissive sounds. "Human science." General Han laughed. "What could they know that we don't?" Jia kept her face blank, but her hand tightened on her datavad. The aliens were so sure humans were primitive. They never considered that being new to space travel didn't mean being stupid. regardless of where the idea came from. Admiral Day said firmly, "We should investigate. If the Sorum have this technology, we need countermeasures." Gia felt a small victory. Her planted information was working. The Alliance was beginning to take the Sorum threat seriously. After the meeting, Gia returned to her private research. She had been studying the attacked worlds, looking for patterns. Suddenly, she noticed something odd. All the attacked planets had similar atmospheres, but planets with high levels of nitrogen and oxygen, like Earth, had been avoided completely. Gia's heart raced with excitement. This could be important. The Sorum might have a weakness, something in Earth-like atmospheres they couldn't tolerate. She gathered her courage and decided to speak to Admiral Dai directly. She waited outside the command center until he emerged. "Admiral," she said, stepping forward, "I noticed something about the Sorum attacks." Admiral Dai looked down at her with surprise, as if a chair had suddenly spoken. "Not now, human," he said. "I have important matters to discuss with General Han." "But sir, I think they have a weakness." "Later," he interrupted, already walking away. "Leave your notes with my assistant." Gia stood there, her words unheard. Again. After 3 years of being invisible, why had she expected anything different? That night in her room, Gia made a decision. If they wouldn't listen, she would have to act on her own. She accessed the main computer using her unrestricted codes. The aliens had never bothered to limit what a human could see or do in the system. Why would they? Humans couldn't possibly understand their advanced technology. But Gia understood everything. She began analyzing atmospheric data from all planets in Alliance space. Her theory was correct. The Sorum had carefully avoided worlds with Earth-like atmospheres. Something common on Earth was toxic to them. Gia worked through the night, creating a detailed report. When she finished, she hesitated. Who would read it? Who would believe a human had solved the puzzle? No one. Gia leaned back in her chair, thinking hard. The Alliance needed this information, but they would never accept it from her. Then she had an idea. She didn't need to be heard. She just needed to be right. With new determination, Gia began planning. The aliens might not see her, but they would certainly feel her actions. It was time for the invisible human to make herself known, not with words, but with results. The Sorum were coming, and she was going to be ready. For the next 2 weeks, Gia worked in secret. During the day, she was still the invisible human assistant. She took notes, brought drinks, and stood quietly in corners. No one noticed the small changes she was making to the Alliance systems. At night, she became something else entirely, a ghost in the machine. Gia's first step was to redirect supply ships. She made small changes to shipping orders, sending extra food, medicine, and weapons to planets with Earth-like atmospheres. If her theory was right, these worlds would be safe from the Sorum. They could become shelters when the main attack came. Another computer glitch, grumbled the Durrani supply officer when he noticed the changed orders. But he didn't question them further. The Alliance had bigger problems. Next, Gia sent coded messages to all human colonies near Alliance space. She warned them about the Sorum and advised them to strengthen their defenses. She signed the messages as Alliance Command, so they would be taken seriously. The Alliance leaders were too busy arguing about how to fight the Sorum to notice these small changes. They still couldn't agree on a strategy. The Vec wanted to attack. The Durrani wanted to negotiate. The Mach wanted to build better shields. None of them had a plan that would actually work. One day, Gia was delivering reports to the junior officers section when someone called her name. "Gia, do you have a minute?" She turned in surprise. It was Officer Young, a young Durrani who had joined the headquarters staff recently. "Yes, officer," she replied carefully. "These reports about Earth's atmosphere, did you prepare them?" Young asked, holding up the data Gia had secretly added to the science division's files. Gia's heart raced. "I just organized the reports, sir." Young looked at her with all 4 eyes focused, a sign of serious interest among Durrani. Well, whoever wrote this report is onto something important, he said. I've been studying Earth sciences as a hobby. There's something special about your planet's mix of gases. Gia hesitated. Was this a trap? Or could Yum be different from the other aliens? What do you think makes Earth special? She asked carefully. Several things, Yum replied. But most interesting is the high oxygen level. Most advanced species evolved in low oxygen environments. This matched Jia's theory exactly. The Sorim must be vulnerable to oxygen. That's fascinating, she said, allowing a little of her real intelligence to show. Do you think the Sorim might be affected by oxygen? Young's eyes widened. That's exactly what I've been wondering. But no one will listen to a junior officer. For the first time in years, Gia smiled genuinely at an alien. I know the feeling. That night, Young helped Gia access the military simulation systems. Together, they tested her theory. They created a virtual battle where Alliance ships released Earth atmosphere gases against Sorim attackers. The simulation results were clear. High concentrations of oxygen caused Sorim ships to falter and retreat. We need to tell Admiral Da, Young said excitedly. Gia shook her head. They won't listen to us. You're too junior, and I'm human. Young blinked all four eyes in the Durrani expression of surprise. But this could save the Alliance. It will, Gia promised. But we need to be clever about how we use this information. She was already planning her next steps. With Young's help, she could access even more Alliance systems. They could prepare defenses based on her oxygen theory without waiting for official approval. For the first time since the crisis began, Gia felt hope. She was no longer alone in her fight. And soon, the Alliance would learn that the human girl they all forgot was the one who would save them all. The warning came at midnight. The Sorim fleet, larger than anyone had expected, had entered Alliance space. They were heading straight for the capital system. Alarms rang throughout headquarters. Aliens rushed to battle stations. Evacuation orders went out to all civilian areas. Gia was ready. For weeks, she had been preparing for this moment. Her secret supply caches were in place. Her backup communications network was active. Her defensive plans were complete. All ships to defensive positions, ordered High Commander Ta from the main control room. Prepare to evacuate the station. Gia stood near the back wall, watching the chaos unfold. She caught Young's eye across the room. He gave her a slight nod. Their preparations were about to be tested. The first Sorin ships appeared on the long-range scanners. They moved in perfect formation, hundreds of dark shapes against the stars. They're jamming our communications, reported a sensor officer. We're losing contact with the outer defense ring. Send runners with backup orders, Commander Tay ordered. But Gia had expected this. The Sorim used quantum interference to block normal communications. That's why she had built her own backup system using old-style radio waves. Technology so outdated the Sorim didn't bother to jam it. The attack began. Sorim ships fired strange energy weapons that cut through Alliance shields like they weren't there. Alliance ships fired back, but their weapons seemed to do little damage. We need to retreat, Admiral Day said grimly. We can't win this battle. Just then, the main communication systems failed completely. The command center went dark for a moment before emergency power came on. We've lost contact with the fleet, someone shouted. We can't coordinate the retreat. This was the moment Jia had been waiting for. She slipped out of the command center unnoticed and hurried to a small room nearby. Young was already there, working at a simple radio setup they had built together. It's time, she said. Young nodded. The fleet is waiting for orders. What should I tell them? Form a sphere around these coordinates, Gia said, pointing to a spot on their star map. Then release the oxygen canisters we placed on all ships last week. Young hesitated. If we're wrong. We're not wrong, Gia said firmly. Trust me. Young began transmitting the orders using Admiral Day's command codes, which Gia had borrowed weeks ago. The Alliance fleet, confused but disciplined, followed the mysterious commands. From their hidden room, Jia and Young watched on a small screen as the battle unfolded. The Alliance ships formed a tight sphere at the coordinates Jia had chosen, where sensors showed the Sorum ships were gathering for their final attack. Now, Jia whispered. On her command, hundreds of Alliance ships released special canisters into space. The canisters burst, creating a cloud of Earth atmosphere gases, rich in oxygen. The effect was immediate. Sorum ships that entered the cloud began to falter. Some lost power, others spun out of control. Their perfect formation broke apart. It's working, Young said excitedly. They can't handle the oxygen. Jia nodded, her face serious. Send the attack order. Tell the fleet to target any damaged ships. The Alliance ships pressed their advantage. For the first time, the Sorum were in retreat. When emergency systems were restored an hour later, the command center came back online. Admiral Dai and the other leaders stared in shock at the battle displays. We're winning, Commander Ta said in disbelief. How is this possible? Admiral Dai studied the tactical display closely. Someone has been commanding the fleet, he said. But who? And how? Our systems were down. He turned to face the room full of officers. Who gave these orders? He demanded. Who came up with this strategy? The room fell silent. No one stepped forward. Then Young stood up from his junior officer's station. Sir, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I think you should talk to Jia. Who? Admiral Dai asked, frowning. The human assistant, sir, Young replied. The one who's been here all along. All eyes turned to the small human woman standing quietly by the wall. The command center fell silent. All eyes turned to Jia, who stood calmly by the wall. For many of the aliens, it was like seeing her for the first time. The human. Admiral Dai said in disbelief. What does she have to do with this? Young stepped forward bravely. Sir, Jia created the plan that saved us. She built the backup communication system. She discovered the Sorum weakness to oxygen. Disbelieving murmurs filled the room. A human, responsible for their victory. Impossible, said Science Director Gill. A human couldn't understand our systems well enough to do this. Admiral Day approached Jia, slowly, studying her with all four eyes. Is this true? He asked. Jia met his gaze steadily. Yes, Admiral. Explain. Jia took a deep breath. After years of being invisible, it was strange to have everyone's attention. I noticed the Sorum avoided planets with Earth-like atmospheres, she said. Our planet has much higher oxygen levels than most inhabited worlds. I theorized that oxygen might be toxic to them. She walked to the main display and brought up her data. Charts and patterns appeared on the screen. Work she had been doing secretly for weeks. I tested the theory with Officer Young using military simulations. We confirmed that oxygen disrupts Sorum technology and possibly harms the Sorum themselves. Commander Ta stepped closer, his tentacles swirling with agitation. And the battle plan. The communication system. How did you manage those? I've worked here for 3 years, Jia replied simply. I've had access to all Alliance systems. No one ever restricted what I could see or do because you're human. Admiral Dai finished for her. We assumed you couldn't understand our technology. Jia nodded. I have a perfect memory. I remember everything I see or hear. I learned all 47 Alliance languages by listening to you speak. I studied your systems while you ignored me. The room was completely silent now. The aliens looked at each other uncomfortably. Why didn't you come forward with this information? General Han demanded. Why act in secret? Young answered before Jia could. We tried. No one would listen to a junior officer or a human assistant. Admiral Day turned to face the other leaders. The human saved us, while we were too proud to see her value. He turned back to Jia. How did you know what to do? Where did you learn strategy? I've been in every military briefing for 3 years, Jia said. I've heard all your tactics discussed. I know how the Vec prefer direct assault, how the Durrani use flanking maneuvers, how the Mach rely on defensive formations. I combined the best of each approach. Commander Tay's skin had darkened with emotion. You commanded our entire fleet without authority. That's against regulations. Yes, Jia agreed. But it worked. The battle displays showed the Sorum still retreating. Alliance ships were pursuing cautiously, using the oxygen clouds as weapons. Admiral Dai studied Jia for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect among Durrani. You saved us, he said. Whatever rules you broke, the Alliance owes you a debt. Not everyone was convinced. Some officers muttered about proper protocols and chain of command, but they couldn't argue with success. The Sorum were retreating. The capital was safe. The Sorum will regroup, Jia warned. This was just one battle. They'll adapt their tactics next time. Admiral Dai nodded. Then we need to prepare. And it seems we have a new advisor to help us. He turned to the other leaders. Unless anyone objects. No one spoke. Even those who doubted Jia couldn't deny her success. Very well, Admiral Dai said. Jia, you will join the strategic command team. We need your insights more than ever. For the first time in years, Jia felt truly seen. The human girl they all forgot had finally been remembered. 2 days later, Jia stood at the front of the war room. Maps and battle plans covered the walls. Alliance leaders sat around a large table, watching her with a mix of curiosity and doubt. The Sorum will attack again, Jia said. But this time, we'll be ready. We won't just defend. We'll take the fight to them. With what weapons? Asked General Han. Our ships can barely damage theirs. Jia pulled up an image on the main screen. This is a terraforming device. It's used to change the atmosphere of planets for colonization. The aliens nodded. They all knew about terraforming technology. I propose we modify these devices, Jia continued. Instead of gradually changing atmospheres over months, we make them release a concentrated burst of Earth gases, especially oxygen. Science Director Gil frowned. That's not what they're designed for. But it's possible, Jia insisted. Your engineers can make the changes in 2 days. Admiral Dai studied the plans. And you believe this will work against the Sorum fleet? Yes, Jia said confidently. Based on our last battle, oxygen doesn't just disable their ships. It poisons the Sorum themselves. Not everyone was convinced. Some officers thought the plan was too risky. Others didn't trust a strategy created by a human. But Admiral Dai supported Jia, and his opinion carried weight. We will proceed with Jia's plan, he announced. Begin modifications immediately. The next day, sensors detected a massive Sorum fleet approaching. It was twice the size of the first attack force. The Sorum had called in reinforcements. Jia coordinated with Alliance engineers as they worked to modify the terraforming devices. Young helped, translating her ideas for the technical teams. Will we be ready in time? Young asked worriedly. We have to be, Jia replied, checking another set of calculations. There won't be a second chance. The modified devices were loaded onto Alliance ships just hours before the Sorum arrived. Jia's plan was simple but daring. Small, fast ships would dart in close to the Sorum fleet and deploy the terraforming devices. The devices would create expanding clouds of oxygen-rich gas that would spread through the enemy formation. All ships, prepare for battle, Admiral Da commanded from the flagship. Jia stood beside him on the bridge, now wearing an official advisor's uniform. The Sorum attacked with even greater force than before. Their ships moved in new formations, clearly adapted to avoid the oxygen tactic from the previous battle. They've learned, Commander Tai observed. They're keeping their distance. Some Alliance captains panicked as the Sorum pressed their attack. They abandoned Jia's plan and fell back on old tactics. Their ships were quickly damaged or destroyed. Stay with the plan, Jia urged over the communication system. The terraforming devices must be deployed together for maximum effect. But fear made some officers doubt. A Vec captain openly challenged her. Why should we follow a human's orders? Your tricks won't work twice. The alliance formation began to break apart. The coordinated attack was failing. Admiral Dez's voice cut through the chaos. All ships will follow Strategic Advisor J's plan. That is a direct order. His authority forced the fleet back into formation. The fast ships darted forward, releasing the terraforming devices directly in the path of the advancing Sorum. For a terrible moment, nothing seemed to happen. The devices floated silently in space. The Soran ships continued their advance. It's not working, someone whispered on the bridge. Then, all at once, the devices activated. Enormous clouds of white gas burst forth, expanding rapidly in the vacuum of space. The leading Soran ships flew directly into the clouds. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Soran ships began to tumble and drift. Their weapons fell silent. Their perfect formation dissolved into chaos. All ships, attack. Admiral Dat ordered. The Alliance fleet surged forward, targeting the disabled Sorum vessels. For the first time since the conflict began, the Alliance had a clear advantage. Ja watched from the bridge, her face showing no emotion. But inside, she felt a fierce pride. The human girl they had all forgotten had just given them their first real victory.